Ladies and gentlemen, this is Unfiltered. I'm Mike Ginn. Welcome back to a special episode. This episode, we have a guest that is known for what she's done, but also known for her father as well. Of course, I'm talking about the daughter of the legendary Dynamite Kid, Bronwyne Billington. She's joining me today. We're going to talk about Dynamite's legacy. We're going to talk about her own story in and out of the business of wrestling as well. And then, of course, if you've been paying attention to FightersFirst.shop, we did just launch last month the Dynamite Kid collection. So we'll talk about all that, unpack it. Of course, go to FightersFirst.shop, get the Dynamite Kid collection, get all the great merch that we have there. Bronwyne, thanks for taking the time. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's funny because we've been trying to do this interview now for probably about a month. Both of us took turns with COVID. Both of us, been in and out dealing with stuff. So it's great to finally get you on, get you talking about it. Of course, we did just launch your dad's shop on FightersFirst.shop last month. How do you like all the designs and everything we got going on with that so far?
Oh my gosh, I love it. You're doing such a great job. Just so professional. Your designs are awesome. Like the website looks great. Huge fan.
Awesome. Of course, we started off with Davey. We talked to Georgia Smith first, and instantly, as soon as we put the Davey Boy collection up, the first question I would get, when are you doing the Bulldogs? When are you getting Dynamite? And I'm like, baby steps, baby steps. We got to work our way. I also didn't have the relationship talking to you as I had, done with Georgia. I had reached out to her first, and it just went one thing after another. So I wanted to actually give each one their time.
Yeah.
I gave Davey his run. I'm giving, and of course, it's still going strong. Go to FightersFirst.shop. You can get Davey, you can get Dynamite, and you can get the Bulldogs together. We have all that on there as well. Of course, we got some great work by Kim Parent, the artist, Static Art, all that stuff right there in Calgary. She's amazing. So all that's on there. But, we want to give that run, give Dynamite his run. Now we're doing some of the stuff featured together. So all that's available now. But that's enough plugging. I'll leave the merch and stuff alone before people start tuning out. But let's talk about this story a little bit, because there's a lot to unpack when you talk about the Dynamite Kid. Some of it is legendary. We always like to say he's your favorite wrestler's favorite wrestler.
And I love that.
Yeah, a lot of people have built their legacy based on what he's done. You look at wrestlers today like Bryan Danielson, very similar moveset. He's legendary among people like him. Back in the day, you have Chris Benoit. Of course, Dynamite Kid adapted some of his moves from like Harley Race and some of that stuff. So the legend continues from one legendary wrestler to another, and Dynamite Kid is a huge part of that. Now, there's also the infamous side of Dynamite Kid. We all know about the abuse. We all know about the trouble with Jacques Rougeau and Bruce Hart and some of these famous stories. And then, of course, later in his life, we had the huge documentary on him, and we got to pull back the curtain quite a bit. So we'll try to touch on some of those. Won't take up too much of your time today. But let's kind of go back in the beginning a little bit. You were born in this business. Your dad was an active wrestler, always on the road. Your mom at the time was the sister-in-law of Bret Hart, his wife Julie. What was it like growing up in this business with your dad always on the go? How much did you actually even see him as a kid?
Yeah, so growing up, he would be gone 6 weeks at a time typically. So I didn't see him a whole lot. When he was home, he'd be resting his body or, catching up on sleep and whatnot. So I don't have a lot of memories of him being there a lot. But yeah, growing up, we always had, like you said, my mom's sister was married to Bret Hart. So we always had her kids as well. So we were like, my cousins were like brothers and sisters to us. We just grew up together because our dads were always on the road. So we grew up in this world and we didn't know any different. We were surrounded by wrestlers, big wrestling meals on Sundays, like up at the Hart House. And that's just what we knew. So it didn't seem abnormal to us. That was our lives.
I was talking to Georgia Smith a couple months ago, and she said every time the school bus would go by the Hart House, everybody would be like, ooh, and like, is that your house? Is that kind of how you felt as a kid too?
I actually didn't grow up in that part of town, so I didn't go to school with them, nor did Bret's kids. We grew up in a different part of Calgary, but yeah, definitely, we were known.
So growing up, we know the famous stories, and I'm not going to harp too much on it. I'm not going to hide from it either, but we know as a father, he was kind of abusive. He was definitely abusive to your mom. It became a feud to the point where it was very contentious. And fast forward, she sent him a one-way ticket to go back home to England.
Mhm.
How much do you really remember about that time?
So I will say he was never abusive as a father, so not towards me. I don't have one single bad memory of him that way. And same with my mom and dad growing up. It wasn't something that happened every day, every weekend, every time he was home. It was actually something that led up to all his injuries, um, as my mom probably talked about on Dark Side of the Ring. But towards the end there, yes, there was some abuse, and that's not the man my mom first met. That's not the man she fell in love with or married. So yeah, I just want to point out that it wasn't the whole relationship, but I do remember that first or that last night when my mom handed him his one-way ticket home.
How
Or
old
she,
were you then?
I was 6, or yeah, I think it was 6.
And your brother and sister are right around the same age as you, right? They're not.
My brother was a baby, and my mom was actually pregnant with my sister.
So you're the oldest by a few years.
I'm the
Okay.
oldest. My brother's 3 years younger than me.
Okay. So that happens. And of course, for people outside of the bubble, right? Dynamite Kid in the 70s and 80s was the coolest guy going, right? Like when he started wrestling in 75, him and Davey kind of tagged up in England. They did what some people kind of call circus wrestling. Like when it first came to America, they weren't used to all these flips and all these acrobatics that, like, even Davey, who's a big dude, was doing flips around. Dynamite was just doing circles around everyone. And then, of course, they do have a home life. They're not home very often. They're on the road, especially back those days, over 300, sometimes over 350 days a year, depending on where they were going for work. Your dad was in England. He came over to Stampede Wrestling in Calgary. He was in Japan, of course, in the 80s with Vince in WWF, then back to Japan. So he was constantly traveling the globe, not just even one continent. As a kid, and you see him very rarely, did you ever like kind of, and I know eventually you followed in his footsteps, but did you ever kind of like not like the business because you didn't see your dad so much?
Uh, it wasn't because that he was gone that I didn't like it. It was later on after, he ended up, with so many surgeries and he ended up in a wheelchair. I really despised the business for putting him in that situation. So, yeah, I despised it. I'm like, why would you want to get, you know, head damage and put yourself in a wheelchair and, yeah, be
Yeah,
away
Harley
from
Race
your
famously said
family.
he regretted ever inventing that diving headbutt
Mhm.
because the torque it puts on your spine is just not natural. There's no way to come back from it.
Yeah.
Um, your dad obviously grew up in an era in the business where pain pills were prevalent, drug use was prevalent, steroids were prevalent, and all of that could have contributed to some of the things he went through. But we didn't know about CTE back then.
Yeah.
Things like what happened to Chris Benoit and the murder suicide and all that stuff. A lot of that's linked to not just steroids but also CTE, brain damage.
Mhm.
Do you think, especially later years when your dad had the strokes and had all the trouble, do you think CTE kind of played a little bit of part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it started, really short. I'm sure it was the flying headbutts and all that for sure, but also after the Jacques Rougeau incident is when my mom really noticed a shift in him. So,
Yeah, and of course, well, you brought it up, so I'll go ahead and put it out there. Of course, famously, the story goes, uh, he bullied Jacques a lot. Jacques finally plotted revenge. He came around the corner, sucker punched him with a roll of quarters, knocked out Dynamite's 2 front teeth, and then Vince basically said, "You guys either squash this, or I'm firing both teams." And then they kind of just stayed away from each other after that. Ironically, Jacques actually says nice things about Dynamite now. Like if you hear interviews, he talks about how great he was.
yeah.
He just didn't like the way he treated him. And I always had a bad opinion of Jacques as a fan because he's a bad guy. He played the heel, the Mountie. As a fan throughout the 80s and 90s, I was like, I can't stand this guy. But if you hear him talk now, he's actually very like contrite and very respectful of everybody he's ever performed with, even Dynamite Kid, considering their past. So that's kind of crazy. I kind of relate it to MMA sometimes, how you go to war with somebody and then like your best friends afterwards. And it's you see Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Iron Sheik like getting busted for smoking weed together but on TV they're like fighting like cats and dogs. So It's always crazy when you kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. Um, but let's talk about you for a second before we kind of dive deep into your dad. You followed in his footsteps for a little bit, the Dynamite doll. What made you actually jump into the business?
My first show I got involved here, it was going to be at the Victoria Pavilion where Stampede Wrestling really took place here in Calgary. And it was just a tribute show for all the Stampede wrestlers. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that for my dad. I can get involved. This one show, I'll do it. And I was super nervous, not really used to being in the spotlight or anything like that, and always been really modest and shy. So I did the show and I had so much fun, like backstage with all the wrestlers, and there was a lot of Stampede wrestling guys there, and hearing lots of stories about my dad and all the current wrestlers, and they had lots of big names at that show, and I just had so much fun that I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to come back next month. I felt like I belonged. I kind of found something where it
Yeah,
made sense, and it was just so much fun, and so I continued going.
it's kind of like a home.
Yeah.
How long did you do it for?
I mean, I haven't really done it for, I guess, a couple years now, just because of the pandemic. Shows are running here, but everything is really weird and different. So, kind of took a step back and got involved in wrestling in different ways. Just started doing more podcasts. I was focusing on my dad's merchandise and his Instagram page. So, I feel like I'm just trying to find different ways to still keep my dad's legacy alive.
Yeah, because I noticed you hadn't performed in a few years. I kind of assumed the pandemic had a little bit to do with it, but
Yeah.
when things kind of get back to normal, is that something you'd want to keep doing for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's super fun. And yeah, I wasn't ready to be done. I was actually like, okay, I'm going to really give it my all. I just had a baby 2.5 years ago. And after I had her, I missed it. So I wanted to get back involved. And then, the pandemic happened. So
So are you like managing? Are you taking some bumps?
I'm just
What
managing.
just managing right now? Any thoughts of like going in there and actually doing a match?
No,
No, just
no.
keeping it safe outside.
Yeah.
Tripping up somebody once in a while,
Like
when they
I
run the ropes.
said, I was always worried about getting injured and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I got involved a little bit later in life. I'd already had my first child. So I think, yeah, I just like being involved in some way, and my way is managing.
Yeah, you kind of see it. I mean, you've seen it firsthand. You know what your dad went through, so
Mhm.
it's a lot to take on the body. Obviously, in this day and age with medical science and the way wrestlers take care of themselves a lot better, you have obviously bigger companies like WWE and AEW and all that that take a lot more care of their wrestlers with wellness checks and everything like that. You don't see as many wrestlers going through what your dad went through, but it's still possible. Any wrong bump, any one bad step, you see, catastrophic injury. So, I don't blame you. Part of me always wanted to kind of jump in there just to say I've done it, but
Yeah.
that's just the fan
Learning
in
a
me.
few things, just have a little spot, but not like a full on match.
Well, I also say on my MMA show, at some point I want to have a fight there too. So
Yeah.
it's just the fan in me wanting to like,
Real
come on,
ones. Yeah.
come on, come
Totally.
on. Do your brother and sister like still actively watch the product and like care about it? Because I know they took your dad's situation a little bit harder than you. You actually reconciled with him. Did they
No,
ever have that opportunity?
no, they don't watch it. And I mean, they sort of had their own ways of reconciling, but they didn't get a chance to see him again after he left in the 90s. So,
So let's talk about your dad's story a little bit. Started wrestling in 1975 or 74 or something like that. Uh, you come from a long line, bare knuckle boxer grandfather. You had another relative that was a wrestler back in the day. Obviously, growing up in a very tough like part of town, and then of course also his cousin Davy Boy as well got recruited into it. What did your dad ever tell you about the beginnings of his story about how he got into the business to begin with?
um, I think I just remember him saying how he would go around to Ted Betley's house. So that is his trainer. And Ted Betley is actually my godfather. So, yeah, his dad was trying to get him to follow in the footsteps of becoming a boxer. And I think he did a little bit of that. But once he got his foot in the door there with Ted Betley wrestling, his eyes just opened up to a whole new world. And that was where he he really shined. He took gymnastics in school as well, and he was really good at that. He didn't do well in school. He was always getting in trouble. He was a troublemaker. So yeah, he did gymnastics and he liked that. And then he kind of transitioned that into wrestling. So it just made sense for him. And with that little bit of boxing behind him, I think it translated really well.
Gave him a nice, well-rounded background.
Mhm.
Now, he was undersized from the beginning. He definitely got into lifting as much weights as he can. Obviously, the steroid use and some other things to help him kind of bulk up. We did an episode on Slamtown not too long ago called the Dynamite Kid Effect. And this was before you and I ever got into a working relationship or anything like that. And it was all about how little guys try to overcompensate to make up for not being one of the, the Andre the Giant of his era, or Big John Studd, or Hulk Hogan, who could just walk into a room and draw lots of money because of just what they look like, right? Dynamite had to go out there and perform. And the point of the episode was really to lead about how people are risking their lives, risking their injuries to perform for the fans because they're kind of overcompensating for their lack of size. You see it nowadays with a lot of wrestlers doing way too many flips and way too many spots and really taking risk after risk. Whereas you see, back in the day, a Jake the Snake Roberts might have only left his feet to do his DDT and fall to the ground. Like, they just didn't take too many bumps. They told a story in the ring, and that's how they did it. Now, Dynamite was kind of one of the people that kind of revolutionized all that. He started doing some of these flips. He started doing the diving headbutt. He started doing more technical wrestling like the snap suplexes, and the stuff he did with Tiger Mask is obviously legendary. But that all kind of started also in Stampede Wrestling, him wrestling Brett a lot. They do a lot of technical matches. Of course, they came to WWF at the time before Davey was even there. It was him and Brett tag teaming. When your dad was active, especially before the WWF years, I keep wanting to say WWE, the WWF years, in Stampede Wrestling, was he as well known as the Hearts? Was he just as big of a deal?
Oh, he was huge. He was at a time what saved Stampede Wrestling. I can't remember why because I wasn't around then, but the crowds were getting low and they weren't drawing as much. And as soon as my dad came around, it was exciting. They had never seen it before. It was a different style, this guy skinny kid out of England.
Yeah.
And he started drawing the crowds again. So
yeah, like I said, it was just a different style. People hadn't seen it before. He compensated a lot and put his body on the line. Obviously, the back and leg injuries mounted up throughout his career. When he went to WWF, he kind of got worldwide notoriety, right? Like him and Davey had been in Japan for a little bit. They had been in Stampede Wrestling for a little bit. But when he went to WWF, first he teamed up with Bret Hart. Then then Bret turned on him and went with Jim Neidhart. They got the Hart Foundation, and that story's its own legendary story. He teamed up with his cousin Davey, brought the British Bulldogs to the WWF. For storyline purposes, I know it was all probably planned out months in advance because back then they actually had stories. Yeah. I know it's kind of hard to imagine that a storyline would go more than 3 months, but back in the day, it's one of the things I say is missing from wrestling now all the time. Yeah. Back in the day, they had stories that would go a year, 2 years, 3 years. Bob Backlund was champ for 7 years? Like they used to actually tell a long story. Nowadays, people don't have the attention span, so it's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
But when they brought the Bulldogs, especially with Matilda as the mascot, obviously they not only became famous for like the adult fan because Davey was a powerhouse. Dynamite was doing all the technical stuff and flying around the ring. And then the kids loved him as well because they had the Bulldog.
Yeah.
I even wanted a Bulldog when I was a kid. My mom said no because it drools everywhere.
Yeah, quite
so like you, she got me a cat. I had dogs too, but it was funny at the time. And in the 80s, he was like a mega star at that point. What do you remember from that time period?
Well, like I said earlier, he wasn't home a lot, but I do remember, events at school that when he would be home and he would come, it'd be, like my Christmas concert or whatever. And everyone was like, you're so lucky. Like teachers were marking out over him, and just like, what? Like, this is just my dad.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of my questions about how the kids treated you.
Yeah, I remember them saying like, "You're a lucky duck," and they also knew that my uncle was Bret Hart. Sometimes, he would be at Christmas or family events as well, or so everyone was like, "You're so lucky," and I used to try to get boys to like me by getting them autographs. I'd like bribe them to like me. It didn't
Women.
work.
So yeah, he took off in the 80s. We had this situation obviously with Jacques Rougeau happened during that time period. Um, he has literally held dozens of titles. Um, but when the time came up in WWF, and of course in WWF it was huge, right? They feuded with the Hart Foundation. They feuded. I saw them in a match with Andre where they were just bouncing off of Andre, so it wasn't really much of a match. And I think at one point Andre sat on both of them because Andre was just a big bully. But evidently Andre loved your dad. Like there's stories about him and Dynamite hanging out, drinking, having a good time, which is something that I wanted to ask you about because you watch like the show The Young Rock, right? The Young Rock talks about his time, obviously moving around the country, but the beginning of it, it kind of starts off in Hawaii, with his grandfather and his grandmother taking over the promotion. And you see all these wrestlers like the Macho Man and the Junkyard Dog and all those. Did you have like a lot of those wrestlers always around you as well, like when you were a kid? You
Kind
mentioned
of.
Brett, but
Yeah, kind of. I mean, not so much at our house, but like I said, we were often at Stu Hart's house or yeah, Bret Hart's house. I do remember some of the wrestlers being at our house, Ultimate Warrior in particular, and
that
Macho
sounds like a
Man not
story.
at our house, but I
Ultimate Warrior sounds like a story.
I was always backstage with Macho Man and Elizabeth. They just adored us kids, so we were always allowed to hang out with them. And yeah, there was always wrestlers around wherever we were. Really, it was
I've
more.
always heard Macho Man was like the greatest person backstage.
Yes. Like I said, we were always like myself and then Brett's kids were always with them. I think Miss Elizabeth didn't have kids of her own, and she was always like, "Yeah, you guys can come hang out with us." And we just loved her, so we were always hanging out with them.
Yeah, it's crazy to think between your dad, obviously Davey died 20 years ago. All these people that we looked up to back in the day are no longer with us for the most part. And it's sad, it's tragic, and it's all for different reasons. Some of it's natural. I mean, some of it's just an accident. Like what happened to Macho Man, he had a heart attack while driving. I
Yeah.
actually live in Tampa right now, and it was over in I believe St. Pete where it happened, and or Largo, which is that area. And I actually drove by the intersection one day and I saw some flowers on a tree, and I didn't think as to why. It didn't click on me. And then I actually came back by the other way because I was just going somewhere, and I saw his picture on the tree. Somebody like stapled a picture of the Macho Man on the tree from that's where he had the accident. Um, and it's just crazy to me, like that was the spot. And it's just like as a huge Macho fan, I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Um, your dad got to live mostly a long life. He did leave the WWF. A lot of people, I think Booker T famously just said it. If you leave the WWF, people don't know who you are anymore. And that's not really true nowadays. I think he's kind of like stuck in a bubble, but because nowadays with AEW and everything else, but we didn't have the access to the internet back then
Yes.
to where we could be like, oh my God, Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask. He left WWE, I think it was in 88 after the Survivor Series match. They decide, they go their separate ways. They go back to Japan, the British Bulldogs. They do a couple tours over there. He did a little bit of stuff in Stampede, a little bit of stuff in England. And ironically, at one point, I think even Davey teamed up with a young Chris Benoit who actually looked up to your dad, like unabashedly, like just that was his guy. When he went back to Japan and Davey got the offer to go back, well, they both got the offer to go back to WWF. Davey said yes. Dynamite said no. They go their separate ways, never talk again. When Dynamite stayed in Japan, And he kind of at that point became everybody's wrestler's favorite wrestler. Like that's when that kind of kicked in, because those matches with Tiger Mask and other Japanese stars at the time, Jushin Liger and some other guys going on around, that was during an era of what we call tape trading, right? Like people had, like, this is the thing, people at home, VHS tapes.
Yes, we have a box full of them.
I bet you have some amazing ones too. And sometimes you'd see them at like here I'm gonna date myself again, a Blockbuster. And you'd see like, oh, New Japan or All Japan Tour, blah, blah, blah. And you couldn't really understand anything they were saying because it was all in Japanese. There was no subtitles. There was no any of this. Me and my friends had mod shipped our PlayStations and Super Nintendos and all that back in the day so we could play the Japanese games. So we were always like following Dynamite Kid and later on Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and all those Americans that came over there. But Dynamite started that trend for everyone. Like you talk about the Gary Albrights, the Dr. Deaths, all those people that came over to Japan as Americans and made money. That was a lot thanks to your dad. Mm-hmm. So when he went over there, so you're talking about being gone for 6 weeks at a time. Was that more like that time period where he'd go do those tours?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember that because like that's what they would do, right? They'd go do a tour for 6 weeks, come home for maybe a month or two, and then go back and do another tour, right?
Yeah, I don't even think he was home that long in between. But
yeah, because he'd also be wrestling in England, wrestling and do some more stuff with Stu and Stampede. Mm-hmm. I never understood, and maybe you can help me out with this. I never understood the fallout with Stu Hart. What happened with that? Because he wrote some bad stuff in his autobiography about Stu, but I never really understood where it came from.
I wasn't under the impression there was really a fallout.
Yeah, there was something that he wrote like kind of offhand in his autobiography about Stu. And of course, this was a time period that Dynamite wrote that when he was in a bad place in his life. Yeah. And he was just mad at the world. And if you watch the documentary back where he was kind of later in his life, kind of he wasn't really going out of his way to make things right with people, but he was also accepting. Like, obviously, you reconciled with your dad. You had, the last few years of his life, you were there. He made peace with Georgia and Harry Smith, Davy's kids. They went and visited him in England a couple times. He seemed to distance himself from some of his past and kind of make things right later. But when he wrote that book, he was super angry at everyone. And, of course, he was dealing with the injuries. He was dealing with being in a wheelchair now, like after his run in 96. When you get to look back at some of your dad's matches now, do you look at them? Has it been long enough to where you can like now look at them as a fan?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think he's the greatest technical wrestler of all time? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah, I do, 100%. And that's why I'm, the timing was never right to start the Instagram page. I never wanted to seem like, oh, my dad's a big deal. Follow me. Like, I'm someone. Because like I said, I'm humble. And I've always just tried to be very
I think a lot of fans are glad you did, though.
Yeah. I never wanted to seem like I'm owed something or I'm a big deal or But after he passed and we did Dark Side of the Ring, I was really missing him. And I needed something to kind of reconnect with him again. Now that he's gone, I can't just call him up. So I started the Instagram page, and that's been really helping me. I don't even post on my own personal page as much as I do on his page because that's more gratifying.
On a side note, we need you to get a started official Twitter page as well so we can tag you on that one and stop blowing up your personal page.
I'm on Twitter, but again, I don't even use Twitter very much. So
yeah. Got to be on all the social media platforms. Business grows. Got to go boom.
I know celebrities love Twitter.
You know why? Because A, it's easy to get verified if you are who you are. And B, it's a fast-moving platform. So they can ignore, I call it the PR platform, right? Because you can ignore all the noise if you want and just post what you want to post. Like The Rock famously didn't follow anybody for the first 2 years he was on Twitter. Or it may have been one follower.
Yeah.
Or one person he was following. And people still followed him, millions and millions and millions. It's just really another platform for, in this case, your dad's fans to tag him, remember him, share their love for him. Yeah. And, you'll get the bad with it on every social media platform. I don't think Instagram is as bad as Twitter. I think Twitter's kind of toxic sometimes.
Yeah.
But it is another platform for people to kind of share their memories. So we see the same thing with Georgia Smith. Like she remembers her dad the same way. Like, she started this Instagram page 3 years ago. Same story. It's just a way to connect not only with your dad, but the fans of your dad, and then it becomes like a whole new family for you.
It
So
actually has. It's been really awesome. People sharing pictures or unique memorabilia or whatever it may be, the video. And
there's
so many people are supportive, and like I've made like a new group of friends really.
there's a lot of old people like me that remember your dad very well, and like love sharing stuff about him. When we started this collection on Fighters First, it was an honor for me. Like, I wasn't just blowing smoke. I wasn't just trying to like say, all right, please sign the dotted line, sign it. I actually really am a fan. Like, I grew up. I'm 44 years old now, and I grew up during that time period of him being like an idol of mine when I was a kid. I love the British Bulldogs. They're one of my favorite tag teams. So that's one of the reasons why I first reached out to Davey and to Dynamite and trying to get those estates. I love, people like Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, and the Road Warriors, and especially a lot of the tag teams like the Steiner Brothers stuff. That was always something I was more into than, say, the Hulk Hogan's and the Andre Giants. Of course, I love those guys too, but I just love the symmetry of the tag team wrestling. To me was
Yeah,
like,
me too. I love it.
yeah, in and out, like, oh my God, I'm dying, tag me,
Yeah.
save me, come in, big boom. It just was always so much more fun than watching an hour-long Ric Flair match with Ricky Steamboat. You appreciated the technical side of it as a fan, but there were parts where you were like, is it over yet?
Yeah.
Where tag team is always moving. There's always something going on.
Yeah,
the fresh
different
person's coming.
Personalities in there, and each wrestler has something different to offer.
So your dad, we're trying to, we really need to get him in the Hall of Fame, even if it is with just the British Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have a solo career. He was actually, funny enough, the junior heavyweight champion or something like that for WWE in Japan, WWF in Japan. But he also had, a good 8 years after WWF. A lot of people don't realize, like I said, he dropped off the map if you're not in front of the American audience, unless you're a diehard fan. He went on, he went back to Stampede, went back to England, went back to Japan. Some of the stuff he did in All Japan was just as legendary, tagging up with Johnny Smith and some other people over there. He feuded with the Great Sasaki, Mil Mascaras, Tiger Mask, Dos Caras, like all these like legendary wrestlers. And you can go back on YouTube and watch all these matches. Like, a lot of them are available. God bless the tape traders back in the day that digitized most of this stuff. Thank you. I found some highlight films that we've used of your dad, and it's just amazing. Even the quality that you see now is like crazy how much they digitized it and made it good.
All right.
But after his career, he was living with his then wife Dot, had another stroke and seizure, and then seizure at the time, got put in a wheelchair. I know he had 3 stepkids with Dot as well. Did you ever get to know any of them?
Yes, I met them all.
Met them, but you don't have any kind of relationship with them?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. I always kind of wonder sometimes, because I have a split family kind of sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes you talk to them, them, and it's like, oh, hey, how are you? Yeah. But it's kind of very distant. It's like,
we don't talk as much now, but when I went over there, the last 3 trips I went over there, I met them all, and I'm the eldest in my family. So I was like, I never had older siblings. So I'm like, oh, I have older brothers now. So it was kind of cool.
Do you have any kind of relationship today with Dot Billington?
We don't talk a lot. I'll reach out here and there, but we don't have a super close relationship. But that was my dad's wife for many years. And, I think he loved her. So I try to be respectful and do what he would want me to do.
Yeah. I mean, everybody moves on at a certain point in time. What year did you go over there and make that effort to reconcile with him?
It was 2010.
Okay. So you were there he died in what, 13? No.
Or 18.
18, I'm sorry. Yeah. So you had at least 8 years to kind of be back in his life a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you remember from the last few years? I know, like I said, he made a lot of peace with a lot of people. he knew he really messed up a lot with people back in the day. He didn't hide from it. He wasn't hiding behind any kind of like, I did this. It is what it is, and let's go on. He was very matter of fact, very blunt. You heard it in his documentary. You heard some of it on the Dark Side of the Ring as well. What kind of relationship did you have with him at the end?
I think I just had, I mean, he didn't talk a lot the last few years because of the strokes. He struggled talking. So, yes, it was a very simple kind of relationship, but I could tell, he was very gentle with me. And, people often use the word bitter with my dad, and I just didn't get that from him. Like, I could talk about, the past, Stampede Wrestling, Brett, whatever it may be, Davey, and I didn't get anger or bitterness from him. Maybe, yeah, he went through the ups and the downs, and he'd come to a point in his life where maybe he wasn't angry anymore, or it just didn't matter anymore. So I just saw a much gentler side in him. And every time I would leave, he would cry, like every time I'd leave to the airport. So I saw a much gentler side of my dad than anyone else in the world, I think.
I think it's funny. Like I heard this story about the tattoos he would get for his kids, and like he called you Tweety Bird, and he never wanted to get a Tweety Bird tattoo because it make him look less manly.
Yes. So I have big blue eyes, and he said I was his Tweety Bird. And my brother was a crazy, off the wall, typical boy. So he was his Tasmanian devil. So when we had went there, 1995, my brother and I went for the whole summer in England after my dad had left Canada. We were there for the whole summer, and he had gotten a Tasmanian devil tattoo on his arm with my brother's name underneath. So that was new since he left Canada. So I
Yeah.
was like, "Well, Dad, you have to get mine now. Like, you're gonna get Tweety Bird on the other side." And he told me, "Yes, yes, I would." But he told my mom on the phone, like, "Bloody hell, I can't get that. Like, that'll make me less manly." So, and then years later, like more recently, I found out Tweety Bird's actually a boy. So I was like, "Dad, what are you saying?"
I never knew that. But funny enough, I could tell you a billion people don't know that Bambi was a boy either.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, lots of weird cartoons like that back in the day.
Um, yeah, I always thought that was a funny story about the Tweety Bird thing. I'm surprised later in the years he just didn't get it because he didn't care no more. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
then when we
get a
first
little up there.
reconciled, when I went over there in 2010, I went to a tattoo shop, like it was really close to where he was born in Goulburn, and I got Dynamite in handwriting on my ankle. So I went home and showed him. So that's kind of special because
But
I was
like,
like,
Dad, you owe me one now.
"Yeah, I'll get you a Tweety Bird."
Did he ever have a chance to meet any of his grandchildren?
No, I didn't take them over. Well, my daughter was only 2 when we first made up, so I was worried about the time change. It's an 8-hour difference and traveling, and it's
Yeah,
hard
because
enough.
you're all the way you're all the way on the other side of Canada. So
Major jet lag, so I never did take them. Um, I think he got to Skype with them though.
okay, at
Yeah.
least he got to see them.
Well, just my one, my eldest, Miami.
I've been meaning to ask because I timeshare in Miami. I've second home to me. Why did you name your daughter Miami?
When I was pregnant with her, I got a baby name book. It was my first child, so that's what you do, get a baby name book. And at the time, so she was born in 2008, so I think it was the number one girl name in 2007 was Paris, probably from Paris Hilton.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, I hate that name, but I really like the idea of a city name." So I was trying to think of unique ones.
So you thought of your favorite?
I thought of Miami because I pictured this blonde, tan little beach babe, and that's totally what she is.
I think it's awesome because I've never heard somebody have that
Never
name,
met another.
and I was like, well, maybe Miami has some secret meaning. I don't know, but like I think it's awesome because, like I said, you're never going to meet another, and what better city, than Miami? So there you go.
My second one, her middle name is Memphis because if she was a boy, she was going to be Memphis. I would have had Miami and Memphis.
Well, at least then you would have had competition with Gone in 60 Seconds because that was Nicolas Cage's character's name in that one.
Okay.
Before I let you get out of here, I have a couple more questions for you. One, what kind of plans do you have for your dad's legacy kind of going forward? Like, where do you kind of see some of this going that you're working with, the Instagram page and all of this other stuff?
I think more than anything, it's just for me to feel complete and full, and it's doing that. So I think the only other thing I would need to really accomplish is Hall of Fame.
How does your mom feel about everything? Because I know I saw the picture of Kim shared the picture of me with you two signing the British Bulldogs poster or painting that she made.
Mhm.
And I know your mom has uh, liked some of the stuff that we've done as far as the collections and stuff like that. How involved is she with everything right now?
She's just super supportive. She loves that I'm diving in head first, and she has like an amazing memory of and collection of stories. So anytime I have to ask a question or get like a date, or she's there with all the details. So she's been really helpful because obviously I was so young when my
Yeah,
dad was really big in wrestling. So
yeah,
she's happy to see what I'm doing. She's proud of me.
that is one of the harder parts of doing some of these interviews with legendary wrestlers' children because a lot of them been gone for so long. Dynamite obviously only passed away a few years ago, but like Davey's been gone for 20 years. You see somebody like I saw Roddy Piper's daughter do an interview recently, and he's been gone several years now. And a lot of times when these wrestlers were in their peak, the children were so young.
Yeah.
Um, you were like a toddler when he was running around doing WWF stuff, you
Yeah.
know. And now here you are kind of trying to answer questions about his legacy when you were trying to like more from the stories you're told than
Yeah.
probably remembering because I know as a kid my mom will tell me something that happened and I'll be like yeah I remember that. I
Yeah.
don't remember that. I
Yeah.
might have seen a picture of it and I'm like I can put myself there,
Totally.
but yeah.
But it does
And
help, like, yeah, seeing the pictures or, my mom reminding me, then I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I was there," and then you remember.
yeah, and you're blessed because there's a million pictures of your dad. There's a million people telling stories of your dad. So it has got to be a great way to reconnect with him.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's some really great, like, the hugest Dynamite Kid fans that literally I can go to them with any question, like, "Where was this?" and they know. So it's really great and helpful.
yeah, and shout out to Ken. He loves both your dad and Davey and like
Yes.
gobbles up any merch we put
He was
out.
the
So
first to order a shirt. Thanks, Ken.
yeah, like thank you, Ken, because he hit me up as soon as we put that we had Dynamite. Well, no, at first we did Davey, and he was like, "You got to get Dynamite. You got to get tag team." And then as soon as I did the Dynamite, that was the first time and this is a grown man, like around our age, maybe a little older. First time in his life he had ever bought a wrestling T-shirt,
Oh, wow.
and he bought the Davey and Dynamite ones, and then immediately bought the tag team shirt as soon as it came out as well. So thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Um,
Support means
how
a
does
lot.
that how does that make you feel though? Like now, like this many years later, your dad's gone. He hasn't been active since the '90s. How does that feel to make people still love and miss him?
Well, that's the thing is so many people, wrestling fans love merch. I love merch. Um, so people were like, "I want a Dynamite Kid shirt. Where can I get a Dynamite Kid shirt?" So,
Especially our own merch. We got.
yes. So, yeah, I brought that to life.
And I'm glad you did. I'm glad I reached out. I'm glad we got that collection going. There's going to be more and bigger things coming.
I
Right
have
now, we got.
another static painting actually here. I think we should put, let's see. Oh, you can't see it. There it is, the blue one.
I'm gonna have to have Kim send that to me.
I think we need to put that on a baseball t-shirt.
We can make that happen. We'll talk to
Yeah.
Kim, make that happen. She actually, and shout out to Kim Parent,
Yes.
one of the most amazing art. She needs to take more credit for her work.
Static is her Instagram handle.
Yep, and I'll make sure I tag that in the description.
Mhm.
She sent me, I think, like a dozen prints, just to be nice. Like she just sent them to me because we're working together.
Yes.
And Owen Hart, Brett, like
Mhm.
your dad, Davey,
Brian
uh,
Pillman.
Brian Pillman's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and especially the whole loose cannon gimmick later in his career. Like I was hooked,
Yeah.
and I've been desperately trying to get him in the shop. I can't seem to get through to the family, but I'm trying to make that happen. And unfortunately, they're also represented by CMG now, so I have to go through the corporate way to do that as well now. But that's a sidetrack. But just amazing prints, like the work she does. How did she get in touch with you in the beginning with to get you to sign those
Well,
two?
the dynamite painting that she did, the first one that you put on
Yeah.
t-shirt and sweater. Um, I was pregnant and no one knew yet because I was like newly pregnant. My dad just passed away. And I went to a wrestling show. Like my cousin Ted was wrestling. And actually, Brian Pillman Jr. was on that show too. That was before he was with
Teddy
AEW.
Hart.
Yeah. Yeah. They were like, That's when they were doing MLW.
Speaking of cats.
Yes. Anyways, so yeah, I met Kim, and she first started with a painting of Smith Heart. So Smith had passed away, I think 6 months or a year before my dad. I can't quite remember, but she did a painting of him, and it was really cool because it was like an old 70s wrestling picture of him and like a gold sparkly background. So I'd seen her at a local show, and I was like, hey, that was a great painting. You're really talented. And then she, we didn't know each other, but she's like, I'd like to do a painting of your dad. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Thinking she's just painting it and selling it or whatever. And then she gave it to me, and it's hanging in my living room, and it's been hanging in my living room ever since she gave it to me, and he passed away. And I have all his grandkids' pictures underneath it. So he watches over his grandkids. And that's how I met her. She was like, I lost my dad too. And she was just so nice and relatable and kind. And
she's one of the nicest people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Ever since.
And she's like a teacher too, right?
Yeah. She works in a fine arts school, which makes sense. And every time I see her, her vibes are just so good and positive. I love her so much. I just want to hang out with her all the time. Her husband is an awesome man. Her daughter's great. They're lovely humans.
Yeah, she's amazing. Her talent. I'm trying to get her to sign her paintings. She like puts it off on the side. I'm like, no, you got to put it on there so nobody steals it. Like sign the paintings because it's amazing, and somebody's gonna try to take credit for it.
Yeah, another very humble individual.
Oh my gosh, she's doing everything for Calgary.
Yeah,
everything she does is trying to get like people into the Calgary Hall of Fame or get them notoriety in Calgary. It's all about giving back to her city, giving back to Canada, and obviously the superstars. And it's not just wrestlers. Like she has rock stars, and she's done paintings of all kinds of famous people. So I'll put the link.
Alice Cooper to sign the painting she did.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'll definitely put the link in the show notes to Kim. Check out all her work. She just went through what we went through a few months ago with the Instagram security bubble and losing your account and having to start all over. So
yes,
we're doing it, Kim, and unfortunately you have to do it now too.
Happening to a lot of people right now.
It happened to us in November. We lost the original Fighters First account. We had to confirm it was us. I confirmed it, and then we never got it back. Ugh. And so we had to start in a couple other accounts. Finally got one to not get suspended because somebody tried to hack us. It didn't work, but then we had to confirm, and it just became a mess dealing with computers. You're not even dealing with people, but 2022. And that's how that happened. And now we're rolling again, and we've been rolling for a while. And thankfully now, because we have the Dynamite Kid collection on FightersFirst.shop, which you can get right now. Before I let you get out of here, Bronwyne, tell people where they can find you.
So on Instagram at Bronwyne Jewel, and then I have my dad's page that I run on Instagram as well. It's at Official Dynamite Kid, and on Twitter I am at Dynamite Doll 84,
which she's barely on, but she's there.
I'm barely on. Well, I'm trying.
If you mention her, she'll actually respond, but
I'm trying.
You're trying. And then she's also going to be launching the Dynamite Kid Twitter account. We're working on her. We're going to pressure her. She's going to do it.
Might as well. Let's do it.
Might as well. Like I said, all the notes will be in the description. Bronwyne, I want to thank you for taking the time today. I'm glad you're feeling healthy again. I can't wait to maybe have you on in the future when we do some more cool stuff. Yes. And of course, we're going to be working together hand in hand to put on some more great Dynamite Kid merchandise and British Bulldogs merchandise on FightersFirst.shop. Bronwyne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.